Hello everybody, and welcome to the third video in a series of videos about tips and tricks with using my Ultimate Thick paint. Okay, so we've looked at some thin paint, we've looked at some paint that has a lot of texture, we've talked about how to change the grain. Let's go to another brush. If we go to this one here, this is called Wet Long Bristle, and if I take this brown color and paint with it, now I made the brush smaller, we get this streaky, it's long bristle, it's wet, so it's going to be kind of streaky, and it also tends to cover, but it also kind of blends. Now, there's one thing that I'm seeing here that I forgot to tell you guys about in the beginning. And that has to do with canvas surface lighting. If you come up to canvas and you click on it, then you can open up surface lighting like this. Okay? Now I'm going to close it there because there's an easier way to open it. If you click on the canvas layer and right click it, that gives you surface lighting right here, and you can click on surface lighting. Now, why I want to talk about surface lighting is, see the shadow here? It's fairly dark. I think too dark. And shadows for thick paint only can be controlled in surface lighting. And I usually take mine down to 1%. Like, well, we'll just click on something else. There we go. Now, when I went to 1%, see how much lighter it looks? So I'm going to say OK. And now I've got my lighting the way I want. Okay, so what I'm liking here is this really, got off the layer there. Let's delete that. Go back up to the thick paint layer. What I'm really liking here is this sort of streaky painting effect. You can take another color in here and bring it in and blend all that color together. You can also use the mixer where you're using multiple colors. Be sure to sample multiple colors. And you can put in that kind of stuff. And I'm getting a little muddy here, but you get the idea. But doing that, we've put in all of this heavy paint. And I know a lot of you don't like to work with heavy paint. You might like the way this brush looks, but you may not want to paint with it with heavy paint. So what do? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to revert back to my last saved copy. So I'm going to come up here to File and go Revert. And that takes you back to the last saved version without having to go undo. So I had saved the version at the end of the last video. So I just took it back. Now what I want to do is, I think I have to set my surface lighting again, though. I do. So I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to click that surface lighting and say OK. And then we're going to go ahead and just save this file. File, save. And now I've got that surface lighting in place. Okay, so how can I make this thinner? Well, let's put one streak. Oh, heck, I was on the canvas again. Let's put one streak of that color in there. And then let's double-click the layer in the Layers panel. That opens up the Thick Paint Layer attributes. And we have an amount here. That amount is the thickness of thick paint. So if I take this down to 20%, and say, okay. Voila, look how that all got really smooth. Now the whole layer gets smooth. So we got smoother up here, less thick where we'd been painting before. But it stays that way. So if I now go and select a color and begin to paint, I am painting with that thinner amount of thick paint at 20%. Okay, now if we double click this, and it's global, it's going to happen on this layer now with any brush, we're going to be painting at 20% of what we would have had originally. If I go and I decide to drop it some, let's say we go to 3%, it drops it. If I come back and I say, let's go back to 100% and say, okay, there you go. You're back to 100%. You can also get really funky and let's say, make this 200%. And look how much thicker the paint became when we did that. Okay? So you have the option. I'm telling you this because I know a lot of people don't like the thick paint to be as thick as I would like to have it. So because I liked this brush thick doesn't mean that you have to like it thick. But you can still like the way it does the streakiness and all of that kind of thing. So if I tell you what, let's go back to revert and get all this back to normal. File, revert. There we go. Now let's double check. We'll come up to canvas, surface lighting, and we're still on 1%. Okay, so we saved it. All right, so I'm going to stop at this point and we'll come back and talk some more. This time what we talked about was how we can take the brush and reduce the amount of paint or the buildup of thickness of the paint that's built up on a layer globally, so that you can, when you paint on that layer, that brush is going to paint with a lot less paint than it was to begin with. But remember, it's global. All brushes will change on that particular layer. Okay, talk to you in the next video. Bye-bye.